Italian Jones, you might have a couple of my books, Hypnosis and Mind Control. I am also a hypnotist, as you probably know, and I have worked with and helped teach hypnosis, and I am on the phone here, or on Skype here, with Roland Berg. And Roland is also a very experienced hypnotist. We're sort of going to focus on the topic of what's called the learning hypnotic memory, because he's one of the very few people who has done it. So Roland, let's give you your credentials, your experience with hypnosis, how long you've been doing it, and high points, low points,
some of each. Started in hypnosis about 5 years ago. Trained with Igor Ledahovsky on conversational hypnosis. Trained with Jeff Stevens on several occasions on the direct authoritarian hypnosis. Trained with David Quigley on somatic healing. And I've done probably most of my work in the area of PTSD with military veterans, pain management, things like that. Worked through a volunteer organization providing services to vets in the San Antonio area. And I've had a lot of interesting experience. Obviously, working with vets, it's a good place to cut your teeth because all kinds of surprises.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's a place to start. When you're dealing with people who have been traumatized, especially if they've been traumatized in adult life, using hypnosis, a lot of people would initially think that would be an option. But in my personal experience, and you have more of it with PTSD, but in my personal experience, you can get very immediate results, very strong results very quickly. What have you noticed?
Yeah, I actually, because of the environment that I work in, it's an interesting situation. Most people, when they talk about trauma and talk about PTSD, tend to really overcome solutions. They get caught up in a lot of really bizarre protocols like that. And I discovered fairly early on, partly because of the environment I'm in, that if you can keep it really simple and just kind of get the motion going in their heads, they can do a lot for themselves pretty quickly. So I typically get access to a vet for maybe 20 to 30 minutes if I'm lucky twice.
Mm-hmm.
So
what kind of reactions do you get after you've worked with them?
I've had some incredible results. I had one gentleman who came in and said, I worry all the time. What can you help me? I said, well, what do you worry about? He said, I don't know. I said, well, what triggers your worry? He said, I don't know. And I said, yeah, you're not giving me a lot to work with. Can you picture yourself the way you are today? Yeah. Can you picture yourself the way you'd like to be tomorrow? He said, yeah. I said, hey, let's work with that and see if we can transform who you are today into who you are tomorrow. 10 minutes later, he sat there, he took a great big sigh, said, man, that's incredible. You took a load of weight off my shoulders. I said, well, actually, you took the weight off your own shoulders. And 2 weeks later, he told people that they should really seek me out because it was amazing. I solved his problem. And when I asked him what his problem was, he said, I don't remember.
One of the things I typically do is to validate the experience that they have is I ask them to try and re-experience the problem. Try and bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
Try and bring the stress, the worry, whatever it is. And they will sit and, you'll see guys darting back and forth with effort, trying to find it, and they just
mm-hmm.
can't do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really cool when you see somebody that walks into the room, you can feel the anger, you can feel the pain, you can feel the stress, and 45 minutes later, they stand up, they go to your hand, and they stop, and when you ask them what's the matter, they're looking at their hand in disbelief because they haven't been able to extend that hand to shake someone's hand without support in 5 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Right. And one of the things that you and I do share in common, of many things as far as being hypnotists, is we've trained under Jeffrey Stevens. Jeffrey Stevens, the late Jeffrey Stevens, managed to teach for me hypnosis that just sort of transformed everything I understood about hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to go into the mind and simple yet significant change that is simplistic. Everyone wants to complicate it, but it is actually that simple.
Absolutely.
And along those lines, he developed a process that you and I are familiar with called the learning. I also refer to it as hypnotic memory. He taught it to me. I was the only person he taught it to. You've managed to learn it, and through some instruction I've given you and some materials I have available now. But it's essentially being able to rearrange how the mind organizes what is learned so that when you're learning, automatically formatted and arranged so that you now have access to it. And when you want to call it, it's instantly available. Now, I've had some experience with that. You have some experience with it as well. What have you noticed in doing the learning place protocol?
Well, first, let me mention that when I actually looked at the protocol, this light bulb went off in my head and went, "This is brilliant," because the simplicity of it is just amazing. And as you were pointing out, the elegance, the simplicity, and everything is just incredible. And that's where you tend to get the best results. What I noticed was that it's a very simple, straightforward process conceptually.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some nuances, there's some tricks when it comes to actually making the rubber meet the road.
Right. Now, here's anyone who has a hypnosis experience and I've heard about this is probably building their innocent anticipation. I do want to sort of give a caveat. This is really advanced. Experience is you're going to have a real challenge as to doing this unless you have at least a couple of 100 hours doing direct hypnosis, not conversational hypnosis, but direct hypnosis with people. And I want to emphasize that. I want you to give your experience with that.
I would agree. One of the things that surprised me, I think, when I started trying to work with people with it, is that it really requires you to be able to think on your feet hypnotically. And to some extent, if you have to think, you're already behind the 8 ball. So your hypnotic skills really need to be pretty automatic, pretty finely honed,
Right.
so that when someone is, I guess, start by explaining that once you put the process in place, there's a constant practice, review, debrief, troubleshoot, and tune cycle. That's what really embeds the system and really gets the system working for someone.
Yeah.
Well, during that cycle of debrief and tune, you have to be able to come up with solutions to problems that the client is identifying instantly.
Yeah, and the client, my experience is the client may not even be aware of what the problem is. You might just notice they're not doing this quickly enough. They're not doing it with enough focus. So, yeah, And it's exhausting as a hypnotist to do it. And for those who, again, aren't familiar with it, this is a process where you work with the client directly for 3 days, or at least 2.5 days. And for the client, I mean, my gosh, they're being hypnotized for 3 days straight. They're bouncing off the wall. They're done, and it's like, it's amazing. But as a hypnotist, you've got to really conserve your energy. And Jeff Stevens, he would for a week, he would say he would just stay at home and watch Matlock for a week so he could get his mind back into the normal sync of things. And my experience too is it is exhausting because the amount of attention as a hypnotist have to pay to this one person, but the results are dramatic.
Right.
What's your experience like when you've done it?
Same basic thing. I was watching what was going on very intently, to some extent even energetically, just kind of feeling what was going on. And at the time I was doing it, it didn't really feel like it was draining me that much. But then now looking back at it, it's like, well, yeah, every night when they went back to do their homework, I collapsed on the bed in the hotel room. And then, oh yeah, and we were done, I basically vegged for a day in the hotel room. So yeah, it does take a lot out of you. It's very, very hard.
Right.
If you've never done anything that requires you to focus constantly for 8 to 10 hours a day for 2 to 3 days, that's really, really draining.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes, that's very true. And that's and it's for those who are interested in it. If you go to, I have the material available, and it is a book. It is also 4 audio CDs that consist of an instruction between myself and Jeff Stevens. I think I gave you those. That's where you learned the
Correct.
majority of it from, and I sort of coached you to it. It is not a series of scripts. I mean, there's a series of directions. There are a series of processes you have to go through, but too many hypnotists, I think, are handicapped, and they have to use scripts as a crutch. And this particular process is much more like learning a process, learning a model, and then putting each individual through the model and making adjustments all the way through it. So that, well, again, incredible result. One of the things that I often mention has happened. I had a client who was very skilled. He spoke English, French, and Portuguese, but he did not speak Spanish. And he wanted to learn Spanish, and through the 3 days, I know he did not focus on Spanish more than maybe 5 hours. He had a book, he went through vocabulary, he would study it pretty much as instructed as homework. We were finished at night. And on the 3rd day, we went to the mall and found someone who spoke Spanish as a clerk, and he did an entire 20-minute transaction with this person completely in Spanish, and his learning was 5 hours of study.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked with him since, still consistent. The things that I've heard and have been reported are amazing. Jeff Stevens had several people who simply made a list of languages they want to learn and the quality of proficiency. And they sort of went through, this month I'm going to learn this one and be conversational on this, and then they would study it, go use this learning place process in order to get that particular skill. Now, you're a bit more limited in the experience that you've had, but what have you been able to report?
One of the things that I found fascinating was, of course, the first step in the process is to essentially restructure existing knowledge. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I found fascinating was after a couple of hours, the client that I was working with, I would throw out totally random questions like, how old were you the first time you got in trouble? Mm-hmm. And they were like, well, I think I was like 8. I pushed my cousin down some stairs when we were playing. But really, though, the first time, I think I was 2. You remember bazooka bubble gum? I took some bazooka bubble gum as we were walking out of the store. My mother made me put it back, but I really didn't get in trouble. But when you're 2 years old, they really shouldn't put candy in your reach. But what amazed me was how vivid their memory was of an event that happened so early in life. I mean, I can go back to about 5 years old. And I think that's probably about where the average person can go back to. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, that usually, my experience, that usually happens the first day. Is and again, some they studied or grew up speaking, say for example, German, up until the age of 10 or 12, and then they've never spoken it since, and they will report they don't have any memory of it. But very first day, they have that initial fluency again. They can just say, I can speak it just as well as I did when I was 12 now. It's all back there. It just fits right into place. So it's an amazing process. Yeah.
And once you see that, you get excited, they get excited, and it actually makes it easier then to start moving forward because they almost trust the process right from the beginning.
Right. What if you were talking to somebody who was interested in hypnosis, regardless of the skill level, and they wanted to learn the learning place process? What would you advise them?
Take your time and be patient. Right? I think I spent 2.5 or 3 months studying the material, going over it several different times, attempting to install it in myself to whatever extent I could. And there were several places where I found myself kind of going, this doesn't make any sense. This is really strange. And then I said, oh, wait a minute, this is Jeff. And then all of a sudden it kind of clicked, and I understood where he was going with it because I'm familiar enough with how he thought. So take your time, be patient, seek counsel.
Right. And again, you can go to my website, which is Mind Control Publishing. You'll find the book. If you order the book, you'll also get it's expensive, even though it's around 35 pages. You also get the CDs with it, the instructions. And you can find it also on Amazon.com. And again, you will get the CDs with that. My advice to someone who wants to learn it is get really familiar with the authoritarian process. There are a lot of people who do very good authoritarian work. What Jeff taught me is there's a point where you talk to the subconscious mind. It's like you are talking to a different entity, a different intelligence, and giving that part instructions. And my experience, when you get good at recognizing that, and you get good at being able to give instructions to that part of the mind and see results, and really be able to notice the very subtle, the very nuanced changes that people have, then you can start being very good. You can start applying, doing the learning place. Any final words regarding this?
No, I think you summarized it well. It really is all about the subtleties in this particular case. And you really do have to be able to drill those subtleties in order to make the person effective at using the learning place. But it's a fascinating process to participate in as the hypnotist as much as it is as the client, because it's really interesting to watch them go through the changes.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by it, even though it's exhausting. Roland, last, give yourself a plug. What's your specialty? What do you like to work in? Your website is mypowerconsulting.us. Just whatever you want to say about yourself.
The things that I enjoy most, I do enjoy working with the trauma victims or trauma survivors. I also enjoy working with people on transformational change using applied conversational hypnosis to kind of help them break free and get their minds in motion. Because once you get the mind in motion, that's when change can occur. When the mind is sitting there like a parked car, it really doesn't matter how good you are.
Right.
It's going to be a parked car.
And your website?
It is mindpowerconsulting.us,
Right.
and all the information about what I enjoy doing and my background and areas that I'm willing to play with people is right there.
And you're in San Antonio, Texas.
I am located in San Antonio.
All right.
I'm comfortable working with Skype. I've worked with people around the world, so
Very good.
if you want to reach me, I can be found.
Roland Berg, thank you very much. I appreciate you participating in this. And for anyone else who's listening, if you have any questions for me or for Roland, you have all the information. It'll be somewhere in the contact information below. So give us contact us. Thank you much. Thank you, Roland.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
All right. Bye.